Sports. Brett McMurphy, Action Network HQ, joins us now. He's been on the show a bunch of times. And Brett, we've been all covering and talking about realignment for a couple years now, this in particular for a year with the Pac-12, since USC and UCLA left, with Colorado leaving the Pac-12 and they're unstable. What do you see as a reasonable path forward for the Pac-9 remaining before we even get into what could happen with the Big 12 in the coming days?
Well, I think the best case scenario for the Pac-12 is to get the media rights deal done, get the remaining 9 members to sign it, lock them in for the next 4, 5, 6 years, and then they can take a breath and just, hold on and see if they can survive and regroup and all those cliches. The question is, can they do that, and how much will the granted rights be worth? And if it's substantially less than what the Big 12 now has, what the ACC has, will some of these guys jump or try to jump to the Big 12? They're in a tough situation. If they do lose one more school, I'm sure you guys saw, I reported yesterday that the Big 12 is not going to stop at 13. They'll have a 14 school in 2024, and they want a Pac-12 school. So if the Big 12 is able to get a Pac-12 school to jump, then suddenly Pac-12 is at 8 schools in 2024. And what makes that challenging for them is, they're not going to play 7 conference games for one. So you got to add somebody. Well, who are you going to add? Well, San Diego State, because of their screw up getting out of the Mountain West, instead of paying $17 million with a year's notice, they now would have to pay $34 million. So would any other Mountain West team. Is that doable? I don't know if it is or not. And if they can't get them, then who do they grab? Well, they'd have to grab somebody from the American. Obviously, SMU, Kleofkoff visited the campus. Tulane has been mentioned. Do they go get, one or 2 teams from the American until they can add more in 2024? So they're in a real tough spot. And then either further down the road, it's just a matter of time. Oregon and Washington, I think will end up in the Big Ten. Will it be tomorrow or next week or even next year? No. Will it be 3 years from now? I think yes. So they're in a tough spot right now. And, obviously, if they can get the deal done, that helps a lot. If they can't, then you're going to have to wonder how many will jump to the Big 12.
Brett, was last Friday, and when the Pac-12 got together to talk, updates and didn't have anything to deliver really substantial once again, other than just, I guess, kind of vague, numbers or whatever it is that they were presented. Was that just the final straw, or did you think that, the straw had, already broken the camel's back when it came to Colorado?
No, Colorado was out the door several weeks ago. I mean, it wasn't official, but yeah, I think in their mind, they had already decided they were gone. Kind of like similar to when you're in a in a job that maybe you don't like and you're ready to get out, in your mentally you're checked out. And I think that's where Colorado was. And as I reported, Colorado's chancellor and AD Rick George met with your Mark in Chicago and in the first week of May. Obviously that was discussed, the bus move to the Big 12. So yeah, this has been going on for a while. It wasn't official until a couple of days ago. So, I just think, it got to the point where they got so frustrated. I mean, look, guys, you know this. They've been trying to get a granted rights deal for the Pac-12 since last July. So now we're coming up on almost 13 months, and they haven't been able to get a deal or even any kind of substantial numbers in front of their board of directors or their president. I think Colorado just got fed up with it, and they just finally decided, you know what, we're not going to wait. We think we're in a better position. And I think it was telling what Rick George said at his press conference, Colorado's AD, where he talked about the Big 12 stability. He also talked about we want to be on ESPN and Fox. And right there, that tells you that the Pac-12 ain't going to be on ESPN or Fox.
What did you make of the statement and whatever it was that you got, after the fact from the meeting last night? Obviously, Oregon State's come out and said what they said, and everybody's just kind of like, okay, whatever. But the Pac did have their own statement, which they've had plenty of those before, as you also know. But what did you make of that, and what sense do you get out of their recent meetings and talks and how they're reacting to the Colorado news?
I mean, their statement basically is a nothing burger. It didn't say anything. They did. I think they learned though, because when they put out their statement in February, they said we're expecting to announce our media rights deal soon or in the near future. I apologize for not the exact terminology, but basically in the near future. Well, I don't know about you guys, but 5 months is not in the near future. So they didn't put a timeline on it. I thought it was telling. They did say that they will not announce any expansion additions until after a grant of rights deal is done, which to me kind of makes it, I guess they know what they're doing, but to me, you would think if you're a network and you're bidding on a conference, you want to know who's definitely in or not before you do this deal. You know, okay, we're going to do this deal, and then you're going to add some schools after we do the deal, as opposed to let's bring in the schools and do the deal so you know what inventory you have. We'll have to see what happens. I mean, everyone's waiting to see. It's a race, and what's going to happen? The media rights deal gets done first, or somebody jumps first.
Brett, you reported about between 1 and 3 teams, and 1 being the most likely to get to 14. But do you think that if 3 teams called them, that the Big 12 would make it work?
If 3 teams would make it work?
If three instead of 1 team, so say Arizona says, right, yes, we're in, but then they hang up the phone with Arizona, and Arizona State and Utah said, yeah, we'll take it. Are they going to say, well, you missed your shot, or they make that work?
I think it would depend on how quickly that call came after Arizona. I don't think they're like holding up a spot for Arizona. Mm-hmm. And, you know, say Arizona State says, hey, we're in. They're going to say, hold on, let me put you on hold. And then they call up Arizona. Hey, Arizona State's getting ready to come in. Are you going to come in or not? I think they would take Arizona State. I think their dream scenario is, I've been told, to get the corner schools, get all 3 of those guys, Arizona State, and Utah. But Arizona obviously is furthest along. Bobby Robbins, the Arizona president, reported he met with Brett Yormark in Houston at the Final Four back in late March, early April, discussing a potential move to the Big 12. Does that mean Arizona's going to be the school? No, not necessarily. But I think if this was a 100-meter dash, they're in the lead out of the blocks, but it doesn't mean somebody can't pass them. One thing that makes that tricky, and that's a great question, is for the TV deal, ESPN has to, by contract, has to pay for the same amount for each Power 5 edition the Big 12 makes up to 4 schools. So they would get the same money from ESPN. Well, that's $20 million of the $32 million of the media rights deal. Fox makes up the other $12 million. Fox is not required by contract to match the $12 million for any additional members. Fox has agreed verbally that they would pay for 2 additions, the $12 million per school that they currently are paying everybody. So Colorado's good for $32 million. If you bring in another school, they're good for $32 million. The Big 12 would have to get an assurance from Fox that we will match that $12 million for members 15 and 16 to do so. If Fox is not going to honor it because they don't have to honor anything. If Fox doesn't agree to pay also team 15 and 16 the $12 million, then I don't think those schools would make the jump. So that's something obviously the Big 12 has to get an answer from Fox. I do know though that they will be at 14 come hell or high water in 2024. And I also do know that their long-term vision, which in college athletics, long-term vision is, maybe 2 months. I do know that after 2024, the thought is they want to get to 16 at some point. But I think they actually may prefer just to be at 14 in 2024 unless they can get those corner schools.
Man, a lot of moving parts here. So there's so many moving parts. How much do you feel like there is a deadline, so to speak, on the part of the Big 12, or are they just simply like sitting back, kicking up their feet and watching the destruction and waiting for the right piece to fall? Or is it like, no, hey, we've got to kind of know things by a certain time? and ratchet up some pressure in that regard?
I don't think they ratchet up the pressure just yet, and I don't think there is a deadline just yet. But yeah, certainly you're going to need a decision at some point. To put it in perspective, when Missouri left the Big 12 to the SEC, they announced the move in November, and they were in the SEC the next season. So, how far into the season could it go? I think probably the drop dead date, and this is just total speculation on my part, would be around the first of the year. And if a Pac-12 team has not made the jump by the first of the year, then they move on to the group of 5. Or if the Pac-12 signs their grant of rights, then you basically, say they sign their grant of rights by September 1st. Then you move on to the group of 5, and you could probably get a pretty quick decision from them. So I right now there's not a deadline, but it would be fascinating to kind of be a fly on the wall for some of these Pac-12 schools, because look, they want to stay in the Pac-12. Everybody's committed. Everybody's committed till they're not committed. But this is not the Pac-12 they signed up for. You're no longer playing in the Southern California market. There's no SC. There's no UCLA. You're no longer playing in the Denver market. Potentially, you could lose another school. Potentially, Oregon and Washington may end up in the Big Ten at some point. So, do you really want to fight to stay in that league? Or perhaps you kind of think, well, maybe we're on more solid footing by going to the Big 12, and you make that jump. There's not a right or wrong answer here. It's just your preference. But this is kind of some of the questions that these guys are kind of trying to figure out.
How do you negotiate in good faith inside the conference if you don't know if everybody wants to be there?
Hold your nose and hope, everyone signs at the same time. I mean, that's a valid question, And also the other thing that makes it tricky is, we don't know what the media deal is going to look like. How much of it is going to be streaming? How much is not going to be streaming? For some, for some schools, it may be a deal breaker if a certain percentage is streaming and a certain percentage is not streaming. So you may have issues there. And then you may have some schools like Oregon State or Washington State that's sitting there saying, guys, sign this, because they know they're screwed. And I hate that, because I think Jonathan Smith at Oregon State is the most underrated coach in the country. And they're screwed simply because of geography. They have nowhere to go. They have no lifeline. So they want these guys to sign it. I'm sure they would sign a different deal or accept a different deal than maybe Arizona or Utah would. So, yeah, getting all these guys to sign is going to be tough. And as long as it's not invisible ink, then they got a shot.
Brett, I mean, there's obviously things we could unpack. It would take hours to do that, but I'll just, I guess, one more question from me. You mentioned the Big Ten a couple times, and I guess when it was put out there yesterday, as far as the Big 12 still on the hunt, and, potential Pac-12 schools, you mentioned it's the four corners have been the focus. The dream, like the fantasy booking for a lot of people would be in Oregon and Washington, obviously, but is there just no denying the connections that continue to exist when it comes to the Big Ten and the Oregon-Washington pursuit? Are they now just very calculatedly just kind of waiting in the wings and watching things fall apart so that that's a bargain? Or kind of where do you see that whole scenario? Because that's been out there for a couple years, those two and, a potential Big Ten move.
Right. Well, I know when Kevin Warren was commissioner that they, back last August, so almost a year ago, that Oregon and Washington, they were cleared and vetted to join the Big Ten. They had one meeting in Chicago, one meeting in Washington, I believe, one meeting in New York with the Big Ten. And they met all the boxes. They checked off all the boxes. The issue now going forward is if you had either of these guys with the new TV deal with the Big Ten, does it increase the amount per school? And from people that I've talked to in the industry, they don't necessarily add more per school by bringing those guys in. So it's kind of a wait and see attitude with the Big Ten now. But I do know that the Big Ten, and it's kind of ironic, I guess, they don't want to, I've been told, they don't want to have the Pac-12's blood on their hands. In other words, they don't want to be the one that killed off the Pac-12 when it's ironic because they're the one that started the fire by getting USC and UCLA. So I think if the Big 12 gets one Pac-12 school, I don't think they go after Oregon and Washington. I think if the Big 12 gets the three corner schools, then I think the Big 10 makes a play for Oregon and Washington, because now you can get them on the cheap. You can get them for, probably not a quarter share, but you can get them for half a share, and they're going to make the move, because they've got two options, slim and none, to survive in whatever's left over in the Pac-12 until all the corner schools leave. So we'll have to see what happens with that. But obviously, the Big Ten has to want Oregon and Washington. It's not Oregon and Washington's choice at this point. And real quickly, that's kind of the people are like, why doesn't the Big 12 go after Oregon and Washington? I think they'd love to have Oregon and Washington as part of the Big 12, except for the fact that they realize that whenever Oregon and Washington get that Big Ten invite, they're gone. So do you really want to bring a team to your conference that the minute they get in your conference is going to be kind of waiting for the other date to the dance so they can move on? And I don't think it would be as quick as TCU's membership in the Big East. They were members of they left the Mountain West for literally 2 weeks or a month or whatever it was, and then they went on to the Big 12. And Chris Del Conte jokes with me all the time. He goes, "Yeah, it cost me $5 million to go to a meeting because that was the exit fee." But that's the Big 12's concern with Oregon and Washington. They know that's a very real possibility, and they don't just want someone to come in as kind of a stopover gap for a year or two and then move on to another league.
Brett, thank you so much for hopping on with this crazy week this week and how it just ratcheted up so fast. And certainly appreciate you hopping on the show whenever you do. We love having you on.
Great work, Brett, throughout this entire process. I mean, you've reported long enough. I just got to know, like, we were talking to Stuart Mandel, and he's talking about all these receipts that people are pulling out. Like, do you keep receipts, or is it just like, man, this is reporting, this is my job, and I knew I was going to be right all along? Do you even pay attention to the outside noise, so to speak, or do you kind of cherish, like, when Colorado moves, like, I told you so? What's that like on your end?
Man, I wish I had receipts. I mean, it's and the thing is, like, I'm not going to get on a soapbox, but the thing that I hate about this whole thing on Twitter. And look, people out there, I guess, there's reporters and there's people who claim they have sources and all that stuff. I'm not going to sit here and rip all these people. But what really gets me is when these people come out with these statements that they're 100%, this school is leaving this school. This school has contacted this conference. It's not like it's a speculation. It's that they are 100% reporting fact.
Right.
And it's like 90% of that stuff out there is garbage. I mean, it really, really is. It's garbage. And so when I report something, it's look, I've told, when I speak at journalism classes and schools and different things, I always say this: I'd rather get beat on 100 stories than be wrong on one. Because when you're wrong on one, nobody's ever going to, it's like crying wolf. And there's so many people out there that the Big Pac-12 is never going to lose a school to Big 12. That person the persons that said that, they're speaking their emotions. They have no clue what's going on. And I would see all those, and I probably favorited some of those in the past few months because I knew what was going on. Because I'm like, you guys are dead wrong. There's people that had said Gonzaga will join the Big 12 in a few weeks. That was back in April. Or 6 months later? That hasn't happened. That's not going to happen. So it's hard. And part of it I feel for the fans, because the fans are reading all this stuff, and unless they follow somebody on a regular basis and they just see something, they don't know if it's accurate or not. And I fall into this same trap, and it's such a weird deal. When you see something in writing, whether it's a Twitter post or an article, your mind that seems to legitimize it even more. So when you see all this stuff on your Twitter feed and you're like, oh man, Ohio State's moving to the Sun Belt? That's crazy. how do you know what's real and what's not? But yeah, anyway, that was a long-winded ramble, but it's look, it is what it is. I know that's how it's played, but I just, I know what I'm going to report. It's factual. It's not speculation. Like when you ask me what's going to happen, I'm telling you my opinion.
Right.
When I report it, I'm telling you what's happening. There's a difference.
And we appreciate it. We do. You've been
got it, guys.
Great throughout. We really appreciate you, Brett. And I appreciate that response as well. I think that was good. Very good.
Well, buckle up for the next few weeks. It's going to get fun.
Well, we'll be in touch, Brett. So we'll be in touch.
Sounds good.
Thanks for coming on, Brett McMurphy, Action Network HQ. Actually, one